Hello, Dale Beaumont here, host of Get Published TV. Welcome to the only dedicated show on the internet to help you to write, publish, and market your own best-selling book. Well, I'm excited about today's video. We're going to be talking about a very important process for both fiction and non-fiction writers, and that is the editing process. Now, in a previous episode of Get Published TV, I walked you through the different stages that a book needs to go through from the writing phase all the way through into actually being a physical product that you can hold in your hands. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I will just give you a quick overview. You have your book, which is being written, and then after that it goes through the next stage, which is editing, and then after that it goes through another stage which is called proofreading. After that it goes through a stage called typesetting, and that's just the fancy name that they use to actually take your ideas that are normally just laid out in a Word document and make it look like that, make it look really nice and pretty, and add in all the graphic design. And then after you have your typesetting, then you have your book printing. So that's pretty much the stages that each book goes through. But after you've actually finished, and you know your book will not be finished at that point, but once you feel that you've taken it as far as you can go, then the next stage is the editing process, or to work with an editor to then take your book to the next level. Now, there are different types of editors that you can work with, and it really depends on how skilled, how competent you are as an actual writer, and how much you know about that particular topic if you are a non-fiction writer. If you're a fiction writer, then it's how well can you actually, tell the story, develop the characters, create the different transitions, build a story, etc., etc. Now, I'm just going to for a moment assume that you are already a fairly competent writer, or you're able to create, a good message, and your product, in the way the words that you've written are solid. If they're not, then we're going to talk about what to do and how to get feedback before you go to this step, because you don't want to be paying for editing, until you know that your book is actually got potential and it's actually got some good content. All right, so but let's assume that you've done all of that. It's a quality book and it's got some great stuff in it, and now you're just saying, okay, well, I need to now make sure it's right so we can get it to that next stage and either submit that manuscript to an actual to a publisher, or alternatively then you can go through the process of getting the typesetting and proofreading done, so then you can actually self-publish. Now, here's my first big tip that I'm going to share with you, and that is, if you are submitting to a publisher, then pay an editor to have your book edited before you submit it. Very, very important tip, because for most first-time authors, where they trip up is that they submit their book to a publisher and the publisher sees that there's a whole lot of mistakes in it, or there are sentences that haven't been structured properly. Even worse, there are spelling or grammar issues, which is obviously a big no-no when you're submitting to a publisher. But there are things that, as a first-timer, there are certain mistakes which could have been picked up if you work with a professional editor. Now, it is true that if your book is picked up by a publisher, then they will actually pay for the editing. But the only way your book will be picked up is if it's a really good book to begin with. And of course, if you've got all the other things which I've been speaking about in previous episodes, like building your author platform and having a list and having people you can market the book to, and being able to do speaking engagements, the media, etc., etc. So we're not going to go down that path, but what you need to do is, in order to be picked up, you need to make sure that you pay for some editing prior to submitting your book to a publisher. Okay, so I'm not going to really expand any more on that, but I will say that if you're a first-timer, in my opinion, you need to bite the bullet. It's going to cost you some money, but it's going to cost you a lot more in frustration and in rejection. So, do it up front, work it into your budget, find a way to make sure that you pay for it so you can get a good quality editor. Now, what I want to go through now with you is a couple of points. I'm realizing that I'm probably going to go over time here, so I may give you one more main tip and then I'll come back and do another video tomorrow or the next day and continue this conversation along. The next big tip is, well, there's two parts there. There's a part A and part B. The first tip, and it should be obvious, but you'll be surprised. Someone once said to me, common sense isn't always that common. Which is very true. But here's the thing, make sure you engage an editor that it actually specializes in books. Now, you might say, well, isn't that obvious? Trust me, you'll be surprised with the amount of people that have called me up saying, my editor is an absolute disaster. And I said, why are they a disaster for? You know, have they done any books before in the past? They say, no, they're a journalist and they're used to editing articles and media releases and things. I'm like, well, there's the mistake. You should never work with someone that doesn't specialize in books. You want to work with a book editor, not a journalist, not a copywriter, not someone who's a film editor or an ad specialist or anything else other than books. If you stick with books, then you're gonna get someone that actually should, not always true, but should know what they're actually doing. That's point number, I don't know what it is, but it's part A. Part B is then make sure you find an editor that specializes in, guess what? Your style of book, of course. You don't want to be working with an editor if you're writing a sports book and they're a science fiction editor or something like that. You want to make sure you've got an editor that specializes in books, and ideally one that specializes in your type of book. Okay, so this is the start of my, my series that I'm going to create. I may do 2 videos on this or 3 videos. The editing step is really important. It's where a lot of people fall down and make critical mistakes that is the reason why their book doesn't get picked up by a publisher, or it's the reason why they publish their book and they lose a lot of credibility because their book's full of mistakes and errors and it gets pulled apart by other industry professionals or the media. So make sure you get this right. I've gone out of time on this video, but I know I've shared with you some important tips. Make sure you take it on board, and I will see you back again tomorrow for another episode of Get Published TV. This is Dale Beaumont. Thanks for watching. See you next time.